Hello, this is Wmpyr here to talk about speed versus technique versus strategy. Now, of course, you could mix all of those things together, but what I'm talking about is when you emphasize on one, okay, when it comes down to black and white, when we're talking about a more abstract point of view, which one is the most important? Which one are you going to prioritize? Okay, so that's what I'm really talking about. So first of all, Bruce Lee played a very, very strong influence in my martial arts journey, okay? Especially in the early years. Today, I would say the biggest influence is more Captain Fairbairn, but back in the day, it was 100% Bruce Lee was a strong, strong, strong influence. Okay, so that being said, what was Bruce Lee famous for? Speed, just unhuman speed, right? And me being smaller, and also here in Texas, I'm definitely going to be, I am a smaller guy, but compared to other people, that definitely holds true. So it's easy for me to appear quicker, okay? But that, you're really not counting explosive speed, all right? Or horsepower. And when you start putting that kind of stuff in there, then I started to not feel as fast. And the other thing is, I met people that were my size or smaller, and they were faster, like genuinely fast. They were just more athletic, and they had the explosiveness. They're just not in the same league at all. Their agility was just off the charts, whatever. Up until before that, I felt agile, I felt quick, I felt nimble, all those things. But you just meet people that are just at a higher level than you are, and then it was very, very quick for me to feel like, man, I'm really not that fast. Now, that's when I switched from speed to technique. Okay, and you hear that, like you have a tennis player. It was young and agile and very athletic. And then he's playing against the older tennis player who's not as fast, not as agile, not as athletic, but that person is able to keep up with the younger tennis player. How? Is the experience, and it is knowing when to be where, is the technique. So it just made sense for me to switch from speed to technique. Okay. Now, I want you guys to understand that I spent a lot of time honing my speed because coming from being influenced by Bruce Lee, so I worked on it. I worked on non-telegraphing. I worked on just being lightning fast. I wanted punches that were like so fast that they were invisible. And that's what I was going for. And I noticed that certain days I would throw a punch and I'd be like, hey, that's pretty fast. And then at other days, I just couldn't. So sometimes you have on days and off days. Now I was just playing around with it got to the point where I hit a wall. Like I couldn't go faster than this, And then that's when I said, like, I met people that were faster than me. What I want you guys to know is that make the effort to be as fast as you can. That's a good thing, but you don't want to rely on it. So then, like I said, I switched to technique, right? But then as I'm working on technique, and this is all long time ago and many years in the making. So I was working on technique, and then pretty soon, like no matter where I went, I was kind of known as the technical guy, I am the technique guy. I have a lot of knowledge and techniques and, whatnot. So that being said, one day in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school, I remember going in and I went up against a guy that probably I was more technical. I had more knowledge and I had more like techniques weaved together, and all that. And went up against this guy who also had technique, but they had explosive technique. So they beat me, right? And when I saw that, I was like, okay, technique is overrated. Yeah, I actually had to say that to myself. Technique is overrated, and I have to find something better. And that might be hard for you guys to understand. A good example that I could give you guys where you could actually see the match is in the UFC. There was Antonio Minotauro Nogueira, who in Pride, he used to be the former champion there, and he was known for his technique. He was probably the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu technique in MMA at the time, and he was submitting people with technique, using Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu techniques. I mean, that's what you want to do, and he was actually doing it against some very, very tough opponents. All right, so he comes to the UFC, and he goes up against Wmpyr. Now, I apologize. I've seen so many interviews with Wmpyr, and sometimes I've heard them say Wmpyr, and then other times I've heard people say Wmpyr. I don't know which one is correct. So, I apologize for that, but that guy also has technique, but he does it explosively. Now, that's not to say that Minotauro Nogueira's technique is bad. I'm just saying, they don't do the technique the same way. The way Wmpyr does it is a little differently. And watch that match between Nogueira and Wmpyr. And in fact, watch all of their old matches, and you'll see the difference. You'll know what I'm talking about. I feel like the way Frank does his techniques is more explosive. And that's what happened to me in the BJJ dojo when I went up against a guy that was more like Wmpyr. I was more like Nogueira. I had a ton of technique. I had, good moves. And up against this guy who just, bam, he just explodes into a submission. I just did not know how to deal with that. And I get the position and I'm like, I got this. I'm going to finish him. I was like, I believe I was in a heel hook position. I'm going to get this guy in a heel hook. And boom, he submits me with like an ankle lock. And I was just like, what? But it was technique plus the physicality that this guy had. I didn't have that physicality. Okay, he was just on another level. So then that's when I switched from technique to strategy. Okay, strategy for me was the way to go. Okay, and right now, in the last many years, I've been there at the strategy phase. So I went from speed to technique to strategy. Now, look, that doesn't mean that I only do strategy and I abandon speed training and I abandon technique training. No, you do all of that, and all of that is lifelong, okay? As much as you can. You should keep, I don't care if you're 80, keep trying to work on speed. Keep trying to work on technique. But at the end of the day, I felt like strategy is the next step, okay? How do you overcome someone like that? Because I can't keep up with who could pull off the submission faster, who could make their technique happen faster. I couldn't keep up with that unless I used the strategy. I lay out the trap for them. Then I knew exactly where we're going to be. I knew exactly when they're going to be vulnerable, and that way I could use my strategy to take them out rather than compete with their physicality and go, oh, there's a submission, let's go for it, So that would be the same with striking or submissions. It doesn't matter. I'm switched my game plan into strategy. Okay, strategy became the most important thing. Now there might be something else after this, but as for right now and the last many years, it's been strategy. So anyway, that's it for now. Thank you for viewing, and take care, folks.